She fainted at the Charity Gala, but when she woke up, the millionaire's son was holding her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The chandelier lights shimmered like tiny stars across the ballroom ceiling. Music floated through the air, soft and graceful, blending with the laughter of New York's elite gathered for the annual Carter Foundation Charity Gala. Every detail was perfection. Crystal glasses, golden centerpieces, the scent of roses and champagne. But in the midst of all that brilliance, one young woman looked like she had wandered in from a different world. Flora held a silver tray close to her chest, her black uniform spotless but worn at the seams. She had been on her feet for 11 hours straight. Her smile was polite, her eyes tired. The air was thick with perfume and power, and she could feel her pulse echoing in her ears. One wrong move, one broken glass, and she would lose this job that barely covered her rent. She whispered under her breath, "Just a few more minutes, Flora. You can do this." But the room was spinning, the lights blurred. Her vision turned soft at the edges like watercolor. A burst of applause roared from the stage, but to her it sounded far away, like waves crashing in another world. The tray slipped from her fingers, silver clattered, glasses shattered, and her body followed, collapsing to the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man in a black tuxedo pushed through the sea of startled guests. "Move, please." His voice was calm but urgent. He knelt beside her, his hands steady, his breath uneven. His name was Samuel Carter, the only son of the billionaire hosting the gala. Her skin was cold. Her pulse was faint. Without hesitation, Samuel loosened his bow tie and lifted her gently into his arms. He did not care that cameras flashed or that whispers chased him across the hall. All he saw was a girl, pale and weightless, who had fallen right in front of him. "Hey, stay with me," he murmured, his voice trembling for reasons he did not yet understand. He carried her through the corridor, past the marble pillars and gold-framed portraits, until he reached the quiet of the medical lounge behind the stage. He laid her down on the couch, brushed the hair from her face, and searched for a pulse again. She stirred faintly, her lashes fluttering. For a moment, her eyes opened, unfocused, meeting his. He froze, caught between concern and something else he could not name. "You are going to be all right," he said softly. She blinked, confused, the world still spinning around her. "Who are you?" she whispered. He smiled faintly, almost shyly. "Just someone who could not watch you fall." Outside, the music of the gala carried on, but inside that quiet room, time seemed to stop. Neither of them knew it yet. But that single act of kindness, one man catching a stranger before she hit the floor, was about to change both their lives forever. Flora woke up hours later to the faint hum of the city outside the window. The scent of antiseptic filled the small room. For a moment she could not remember where she was. Then she saw the folded black jacket placed neatly over a chair, the initials SC embroidered inside the collar. Her heartbeat quickened. The images rushed back, the lights, the applause, the dizzy spell, and the stranger's steady voice telling her to stay awake. A nurse entered quietly. "You fainted at the gala, sweetheart. Exhaustion and low blood sugar," she said gently. Flora nodded, embarrassed. "I am so sorry for the trouble." The nurse smiled. "The young man who brought you in did not think it was trouble at all. He waited until you were stable." Flora looked toward the empty chair, but he was gone. Outside the hospital, the night air was sharp. The streets glittered with leftover confetti from the gala, and the world seemed to have moved on without her. She held the borrowed jacket close, unsure whether to keep it or return it. For someone like her, every belonging mattered. Her mother's medicine bill was due in 2 days. The rent was behind. Her part-time pay at the cafe barely covered groceries. And now, after fainting at a charity event for the wealthy, she feared she might lose even that job. Back in her small studio apartment, Flora set the jacket on the chair. The walls were thin. She could hear the neighbor's television murmuring through the plaster. She sat at her tiny desk, flipping open a sketchbook, the only thing that made her feel in control. Inside were drawings of faces she had seen while serving tables. The lonely woman at table 5, the nervous teenager on his first date, the couple arguing over dessert. Her art was quiet but honest, a mirror of the world that never noticed her. she whispered to herself. One day I will paint for me. Not for rent, not for tips, for me. The next morning, sunlight cut through the blinds and woke her early. Her stomach growled, but the fridge was almost empty, just a carton of milk and a half apple. She ate slowly, saving half for later, and checked her phone. There was one message from her supervisor. We will call you next week if we need more help. Take care. It was polite, but she knew what it really meant. She was off the schedule. She exhaled and tried to focus on what she could still control. There was a flyer on the wall about an opening at the Carter Foundation, the same name printed on the invitation she had seen at the gala. The position was for a junior art program assistant. She hesitated. It felt far beyond her reach, but something inside whispered that maybe it was worth trying. She printed her resume at the library, borrowed a blouse from her neighbor, and took the subway uptown. The foundation's building was made of glass and gold light, everything spotless and quiet. Flora clutched her folder tighter, her hands slightly trembling. She almost turned around, but then she heard children's laughter coming from a small art room near the lobby. Inside, a group of kids were painting bright colors on canvas. Heartwarming. That was the kind of space she had always dreamed of. A place where art was not about price tags, but about healing. When her name was called, she stood up straight, walked into the interview room, and froze. Behind the desk sat the same man from the gala, the one whose jacket she still had at home. Samuel Carter looked up from his file, surprise flashing across his face before it softened into recognition. For a second, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with quiet tension, the kind that came from fate rearranging itself right before their eyes. Flora managed a whisper. You were there that night." Samuel nodded once. "You are feeling better, I hope." Her cheeks warmed. "I am, thanks to you. I still have your jacket." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you can return it after the interview." She tried to focus, answering each question carefully. He listened closely, not as a billionaire's son, but as someone genuinely curious about her ideas. When she spoke about how art could give children confidence and belonging, his expression changed thoughtful, almost tender. By the end of the meeting, her fear had faded, replaced by something she could not quite name. When she stood to leave, he said quietly, "You have more courage than most people in that ballroom." On the subway ride home, Flora replayed his words in her head. For the first time in months, hope felt fragile, but real. She looked at her reflection in the train window, the city rushing by in streaks of gold, and whispered, "Maybe this is the beginning." Far above her, in his office overlooking the skyline, Samuel watched the city lights flicker on. He thought of the girl who had fainted at his family's gala and how she had smiled despite her exhaustion. There was something about her that stayed with him, a quiet strength that his world of privilege could not buy. He did not know why he cared so much, but he knew one thing for certain. He wanted to see her again. The next few days passed slowly, the kind of quiet that stretches between hope and disappointment. Flora checked her email every morning, telling herself not to care too much. But she did. Each refresh of the screen felt like a small prayer. Then one evening, as rain tapped softly on the window, a new message appeared. Subject: Carter Foundation, application result. Body: Dear Ms. Hayes, we are pleased to offer you the position of Junior Art Program Assistant. Your orientation begins Monday at 9 a.m. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen, unable to breathe. Then she laughed, a bright, surprised sound that filled the little apartment. Her mother, resting on the couch nearby, looked up and smiled weakly. "Good news?" she asked. Flora nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "Better than good, Mom. It is a new start." Monday morning came with clear skies and nervous energy. Flora stood in front of the Carter Foundation building again, this time as an employee. She wore her best outfit, a pale blue blouse, the same one she had borrowed for the interview, now carefully washed and pressed. Her stomach fluttered as she stepped through the revolving doors. Inside, the lobby buzzed with quiet purpose. Volunteers carried art supplies, teachers guided small groups of children, and sunlight poured through tall glass windows. At the reception desk, a woman handed her an ID badge and smiled warmly. "Welcome to the family, Miss Hayes. Mr. Carter asked me to bring you to the gallery floor once you are settled." Flora froze slightly. Mr. Carter. She knew which one. Samuel Carter stood near the back of the main gallery, speaking with two board members. Even in a simple shirt and rolled sleeves, he carried the calm confidence of someone born to command a room without trying. When he saw her, His expression softened into something that felt almost private. "You made it," he said with a small smile. "Yes, thank you for the opportunity," she replied, her voice polite but steady. He gestured toward the art room where the children were painting. "This is where we start. Every piece here comes from a story. You will help them tell theirs." Lau. The day was long but fulfilling. Flora helped a shy boy mix colors for the first time, guided a group through a mural about kindness, and found herself laughing more than she had in months. When she cleaned up at the end of the day, she noticed Samuel standing in the doorway watching quietly. "You were right," he said. "Art does more than decorate walls. It heals." She blushed slightly. "It helps people remember they are still human." He nodded. "That is exactly what this place is meant to do." Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed often. Sometimes he brought her coffee during her early classes. Sometimes she left small sketches on his desk: a tree, a bird, a reminder that beauty could come from simplicity. There was an unspoken understanding between them, gentle and growing, but not everyone looked kindly on it. One afternoon, while Flora was organizing brushes, a woman in a red suit approached her. "Be careful," the woman said smoothly. "People might talk if you spend too much time near Mr. Carter. Some of us have been here longer, waiting for chances like yours." Flora tried to smile. "I am only here to work." The woman's eyes glinted. "Then I would suggest you keep it that way." The words lingered long after the woman left. Flora wanted to believe her hard work would be enough, but part of her knew how people looked at her, just another struggling girl caught in the orbit of someone powerful. She decided to stay professional, to keep distance, to protect the little piece she had earned. That resolve lasted until the next charity event. She had been assigned to help coordinate the art auction, a fundraiser for underprivileged schools. As the evening began, the room glittered again with chandeliers and silk gowns. Flora moved through the crowd, focused, making sure every painting had its proper tag. Then she heard Samuel's voice behind her. "You never told me you could paint like this." She turned, startled. He was standing before one of her own works, a small piece she had submitted anonymously. A watercolor of hands reaching through light. Her cheeks flushed. "It was just practice. I did not think anyone would notice." "I noticed," he said softly. "It feels like hope." Before she could reply, a photographer called out, "Mr. Carter, could we get a shot of you with the artist?" The words carried across the room, and a few heads turned. Flora stepped back, flustered. "No, please, it is not necessary." But Samuel simply smiled at the cameras, then turned slightly so she stayed half hidden behind him, shielding her from the sudden attention. He whispered, "Let them see what kindness looks like." "You quite." Later, as the event wound down, he found her near the balcony. The city lights stretched below them like a river of gold. He handed her a glass of sparkling water. "You did well tonight." She smiled faintly. "I am just grateful to be part of it." He hesitated, studying her. "You remind me why this foundation exists. It is not just about money. It is about people who still believe in giving even when they have nothing left." Her eyes met his, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Something warm and unspoken passed between them, something fragile but real. When she finally said goodnight, he watched her leave, realizing that what began as an act of rescue had become something far deeper. That night, Flora lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, the sound of rain tapping against the window. She was afraid of what her heart was starting to feel, but even more afraid of pretending she did not feel it. Somewhere across town, Samuel stood on his balcony, thinking the same thing. The following week brought a sudden chill to the city. Autumn leaves drifted across the streets like scattered gold, and the air carried that faint promise of change. At the Carter Foundation, the hallways hummed with preparation for their next major project, a community art program that would travel to schools in underfunded districts. Flora threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction. But no matter how busy she stayed, she could not ignore the memory of the balcony or the warmth in Samuel's eyes that night. She told herself it was just gratitude. He had helped her, given her a chance, and she respected him for it. That was all. At least, that was what she tried to believe. One afternoon, Samuel called her to his office to discuss the new project. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, sunlight pouring in like liquid amber. On his desk sat stacks of proposals, photographs of children painting, and a single cup of coffee, hers, with a small heart drawn in foam. He gestured for her to sit. "I wanted to show you something," he said, opening a folder. Inside were sketches of a mobile art studio, a bus designed to bring supplies and teachers to rural schools. Your ideas inspired this, he continued. We can call it Hands That Heal. What do you think? Flora blinked, speechless. You remembered that name? He smiled faintly. Of course I did. You said it on your first day. Her chest tightened with something between pride and disbelief. Truest, heir. He actually listened. Together they spent hours refining details, routes, schedules, budget plans. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere bigger than her fears. But the moment of peace did not last. Rumors had started swirling again, whispers from employees who saw them working late, headlines from gossip blogs hinting at the mysterious girl often seen with the Carter heir. Flora tried to ignore them, but one morning a newspaper landed on her desk. The headline read, Charity Worker or Gold Digger? Inside the Carter Foundation's hidden affair. Her breath caught. The photo was from the gala, the night she had fainted. Samuel's arms around her. Her eyes closed. The perfect scandal shot. By noon, the story had spread across social media. Donors were calling for statements. Volunteers whispered in corners. Flora wanted to disappear. When Samuel entered the office, his face was set and calm, but his jaw was tight. Do not say anything to anyone, he said quietly. My team is handling it. She shook her head. This will ruin your reputation. I should resign before— Do not, he interrupted firmly. You did nothing wrong. His voice softened. Let me protect you this time. That night, she packed her sketchbook and sat on her bed staring at the city lights through the window. She knew he meant well, but she could not stand the thought of being a burden to him. Her entire life had been about surviving quietly, not dragging anyone down with her. Before dawn, she wrote a short note. Thank you for believing in me, but I need to find my own strength before I can face this world again. She left the note and her ID card on his desk. By the time Samuel arrived at the office, her workspace was empty. The next few days blurred together. Flora found a temporary job teaching art at a local shelter. The pay was little, but the children's laughter filled the space inside her that had gone silent. She kept her phone off most of the time, not wanting to see the messages she was sure he had sent. Meanwhile, Samuel fought to contain the scandal. He met with his father, faced the board, and refused to confirm or deny the rumors. When asked about the woman in the photo, he simply said, She saved me from forgetting why this foundation exists. One evening, after another long day at the shelter, Flora stepped outside and found Samuel waiting by the gate. He looked tired, but relieved. I thought I lost you, he said quietly. Her voice trembled. You should not be here. People are watching. Let them, he replied. The only thing I care about is the truth. She folded her arms, unsure whether to cry or smile. And what is the truth, Samuel? He stepped closer. That I care about you, that I am not ashamed of it. The street lights glowed against the falling leaves. For a moment neither of them spoke. Flora's eyes softened and she whispered, You should not have to fight for someone like me. He shook his head slowly. You are the only person worth fighting for. The night grew still. Somewhere in the distance, the city carried on, unaware that two hearts had just chosen honesty over fear, but both of them knew the battle was far from over. Kindness had brought them together once, and now, truth would have to keep them standing. Days turned into weeks, and though the gossip eventually faded from headlines, its shadow still lingered around the Carter Foundation. Samuel returned to work as usual, facing the board with calm conviction, while Flora kept her distance, pouring her energy into the community shelter. She told herself she was happier this way, teaching children, staying invisible, safe from rumors and expectations. But late at night, when the city was quiet and the rain traced patterns on the window, she caught herself sketching his face from memory, the slight smile, the steady eyes, the way he looked at her as if she mattered. At the foundation, Samuel's staff noticed his change. He was polite but distant, focused but weary. Every project meeting ended with him staring at the empty seat that used to belong to Flora. One evening, his assistant entered timidly. Sir, the mobile art program, Hands That Heal It, is almost ready to launch. Would you like to attend the opening? Samuel hesitated. Where is it being held? At the Westbrook shelter, she replied. He looked up sharply. That was where Flora had been working. 2 days later, the shelter buzzed with excitement. Children painted murals on wooden panels, volunteers set up tables with art supplies, and the mayor's office had sent a representative for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Flora moved through the crowd, adjusting easels, her hands speckled with blue and yellow paint. She had no idea that Samuel was already there, standing quietly near the back, watching her with a look that mixed pride and longing. When the time came for speeches, the director of the shelter took the microphone. "Today we celebrate a program that began with compassion," he said. "It started as an idea from one of our volunteers, Miss Flora Hayes." Applause filled the room, and Flora froze mid-step. Her name echoed through the hall as the director gestured toward her. She believed that art can heal the heart, and with the support of the Carter Foundation, that dream became real. Treasury. Flora turned, and her eyes met Samuel's across the crowd. He gave a small nod, as if saying, "This was always yours." Her heart pounded. After the ceremony, she found him standing near the display of children's paintings. He smiled softly. "You did it, Flora. You made them see what hope looks like." She shook her head, still overwhelmed. "No, we did it. You believed in me when no one else did." Trey. Before either could say more, a group of photographers appeared sent by the local press to cover the event. For a second, old fear flickered in her chest. But Samuel stepped closer, his voice steady. "Let them take the photo," he said quietly. "This time, there is nothing to hide." He reached for her hand, their fingers brushing, and the camera shutters clicked. The sound was sharp, but it no longer felt like judgment, it felt like freedom. After the event, as the crowd thinned, they stood alone beneath a mural the children had painted together. It showed two hands reaching toward each other through a burst of color, almost touching. Flora traced the edge of the mural with her fingertips. "It looks like the first night we met," she said softly. "When I fell, and you caught me." Samuel smiled. "Maybe fate just wanted to make sure you would not fall alone again." "Ah." A quiet pause stretched between them, full of what words could not express. Flora looked up at him, her eyes bright but uncertain. "Samuel, I do not want to be another story people talk about. I want to stand beside you, not behind you." He stepped closer, his tone low and sure. "Then stand with me, not because you owe me anything, but because you already changed everything." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. He reached into his pocket and held out a small object, a silver pendant engraved with one word, courage. "It is not a gift," he said. "It is a reminder. You already had this long before I met you." She smiled through the tears that blurred her vision. Around them, the laughter of children drifted through the air, bright and unguarded. The city lights began to glow beyond the windows, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. Flora whispered, "You were the one who caught me when I fell, but now I think we are both standing." Samuel looked at her, the warmth in his eyes returning like sunrise. "No," he said gently, "now we are walking forward." And as they stepped out together into the evening, the mural behind them seemed almost alive, the two painted hands finally meeting in the center, framed by the golden light of a new beginning. The next few months passed like a quiet sunrise. The scandal was long forgotten, replaced by headlines praising the Carter Foundation's new program for transforming forgotten neighborhoods through art. Every week, the Hands That Heal bus traveled to new schools, and Flora went with it, carrying her sketchbook and the silver pendant that Samuel had given her. Children ran to greet her wherever she went, their laughter filling the air like a melody. It was the kind of joy that did not need permission to exist. Samuel visited often, not as the billionaire's son, but as a man who had finally found meaning in something real. He would roll up his sleeves, help paint fences, or carry boxes of brushes, smiling when the kids teased him about his messy attempts at color. Flora watched from a distance sometimes, her heart softening in ways she could not put into words. They did not need grand gestures. They only needed these small, ordinary moments that felt like home. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the playground, Samuel joined Flora by the mural. The children had painted a new one this time, brighter and larger. He leaned against the wall, his voice low. "I have been thinking," he said. "You have built something beautiful here. Maybe it is time people knew whose idea it was." Flora shook her head, smiling. "It does not matter whose idea it was, Samuel. What matters is that they have a place to create." He looked at her for a long moment. "You always choose humility over recognition." "Recognition fades," she replied softly. "But kindness lasts." That evening, they stayed after the others had gone, packing up supplies under the warm orange sky. Flora sat on the steps of the bus, cleaning paint from her hands, when Samuel approached with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her and sat beside her in silence. The sound of crickets rose in the distance. "I used to think success was about control," he said finally, "about making sure every part of life followed a plan. But then you came along and ruined all of it." She laughed quietly. I hope that is a good thing. It is the best thing, he said. You reminded me what matters. You reminded me what my father's money could never buy. Her smile faded a little, curiosity glinting in her eyes. What is that? He turned to face her. Peace, and someone to share it with. Flora's breath caught. The quiet between them grew softer, heavier. She felt the same warmth from that first night, the night he caught her before she hit the floor. But now it was steadier, grounded in something deeper. Samuel, she began, you have the world at your feet. Why would you choose someone like me? He shook his head gently. Because you see the world the way it should be. You see people before status, hearts before headlines. That is rare. Before she could reply, her phone buzzed. It was a text from the shelter director. The mayor wants to expand the program statewide. They want Flora to lead it. She looked at the message, stunned. Her eyes lifted to Samuel, who was watching her expectantly. She laughed, breathless. They want me to run it, all of it. He grinned. Then say yes. I'm not sure I can handle it, she admitted. You can, he said firmly. You have been leading since the first day you picked up a brush. Lo. The light shifted, painting them both in gold. Flora felt tears prick her eyes. It feels like everything is changing again. Samuel reached out, brushing a smudge of blue paint from her cheek. Then let it change, he whispered. You have earned every bit of it. They sat there until the sky turned violet, neither speaking, just breathing the same calm air that had carried them this far. For once, there was no chaos, no misunderstanding, no fear, only the quiet certainty of two lives that had finally found balance. As the first stars appeared, Samuel said softly, Do you remember what you told me that night? You said you wanted to paint for yourself one day. She smiled. Yes, I remember. He pointed toward the sky. Then start with this one. Paint this moment. Paint what it feels like to stand here with nothing left to hide. Yukwe. And in that stillness, surrounded by the laughter that lingered from the day, Flora realized that the story that had begun with a fall had finally become a rise, steady, quiet, and beautifully real. Winter arrived quietly that year, brushing the city with silver light and the scent of pine. The Hands That Heal program had grown faster than anyone expected. Flora found herself traveling from one town to another, training new teachers, organizing workshops, and watching the walls of old schools bloom with color and hope. Her name began to appear in small articles and community reports, the young woman bringing art and empathy to forgotten corners of the city. She smiled each time she saw it, but fame was never what she wanted. All she cared about was that the children were painting again, that laughter echoed where silence once lived. Samuel visited when he could, sometimes flying in after long meetings or board sessions. Each time he seemed lighter, more himself. He no longer carried the weight of reputation or pressure. Instead, he moved with the calm of a man who had found his direction. One evening, while Flora was helping a group of students clean their brushes, he appeared at the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders. You missed dinner, she said, smiling. I wanted to see this first, he replied. He looked around the classroom walls filled with children's paintings, windows glowing with soft yellow light, and his eyes lingered on her. It feels alive in here, he murmured. That is because they believe they can make beauty out of nothing, she said. Like someone else I know, he answered quietly. They stayed late that night, talking after everyone had gone home. Flora told him about her mother's recovery, about the shelter expanding, about the plans to bring art to hospitals next. Samuel listened with that familiar stillness, the same calm focus that had first drawn her in. When she finished, he reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder. Inside was a new proposal, neatly typed, stamped with the Carter Foundation seal. This is for you, he said, a permanent gallery, not just for the children but for every artist who has ever been told they are not enough. Flora's eyes widened. You are naming a gallery after me? He shook his head. No, you are naming it. I just want to give you the space. She stared at him, overwhelmed. Samuel, this is too much. He smiled softly. You said recognition fades, but kindness lasts. Let this kindness last. Her fingers trembled as she touched the proposal. The thought of it, her art, their art, displayed where anyone could walk in and feel something made her heart ache with gratitude. She whispered, You keep finding ways to surprise me. And you keep giving me reasons to, he said. Outside, the snow began to fall harder, coating the streets in quiet white. When they stepped out of the building, the world felt suspended. Every sound softened. Flora lifted her face to the sky. catching snowflakes on her lashes. Samuel watched her, his breath clouding in the cold air. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "The gala?" She nodded. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." He chuckled softly. "It was the night I stopped caring about who people expected me to be." She turned toward him. "And who are you now?" His answer was simple. "Someone who finally knows what love means." The silence that followed was tender, filled with everything they had both left unsaid. Flora felt the weight of the moment, the quiet certainty that their paths had been leading here all along. She reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his even in the cold. "Samuel," she whispered, "I do not know what the future will bring." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then let us build it together." They walked down the snow-covered street side by side, their footprints forming twin paths that trailed behind them until the wind covered them in white. In the distance, the city lights shimmered like stars scattered across the ground. And for the first time, Flora realized that the world no longer felt divided between wealth and struggle, between privilege and survival. It simply felt human, beautiful, imperfect, and shared. That night, under the quiet snowfall, two stories that had once belonged to different worlds finally became one. And though the city slept, somewhere in its heart, kindness kept painting its quiet masterpiece. Spring returned with the scent of rain and magnolia, and with it came the grand opening of the new community gallery. It stood in the heart of the city, in a renovated brick building once forgotten by time. Now its tall windows glowed with golden light, and its sign read in clean silver letters, "The Haven, an open gallery for all." Flora had chosen the name herself. She said it was not about fame, not even about art, it was about belonging. The evening of the opening, the crowd filled the sidewalk, a blend of children, artists, and business leaders who rarely shared the same space. Music floated from inside, soft and hopeful. Flora stood near the entrance, her heart fluttering like the ribbon waiting to be cut. She wore a simple cream dress, the same silver pendant resting against her collarbone. Samuel appeared beside her, his expression full of quiet pride. "You did this," he said. She shook her head with a smile. "We did this." Then she turned to the crowd. Her voice trembled at first but steadied with every word. "This place is for the dreamers who were told no. For every child who picked up a brush and believed that color could heal the gray. Tonight, this gallery belongs to you." Applause rose like a wave, and when the ribbon fell, light spilled through the doors, washing over everyone in warm gold. Inside, each wall told a story: murals from shelters, paintings from hospitals, sculptures from students who once doubted their worth. Samuel watched Flora move among them, greeting each artist by name. He had attended hundreds of events, but none had ever felt this alive. It was not glamour or wealth that filled the air, it was gratitude. Later that night, when the guests had gone, the two of them stood alone beneath a painting of two intertwined hands, painted by the children of the First Hands That Heal class. Flora exhaled softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think love was a luxury people like me could never afford." Samuel turned to her. "And what do you think now?" She smiled gently. "I think love is not luxury at all. It is the one thing that does not need money to exist." Two-way. He took her hands in his, the noise of the city fading beyond the glass doors. "You taught me that," he said. "You showed me that kindness and courage are worth more than anything I was born with." Flora's eyes glistened, the reflection of the gallery lights shimmering like stars. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught when he opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring, engraved with one word: Haven. Samuel's voice was steady but tender. "This gallery will carry your name, but I want something even more permanent. Flora Hayes, will you marry me?" Her tears fell before she could speak. She nodded, laughing through them, her voice breaking softly. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the warmth of his touch felt like a promise kept long before it was spoken. Outside, the city glimmered with new rain, lights reflected in every puddle like pieces of a brighter tomorrow. Through the glass, the gallery glowed behind them, a sanctuary born not from wealth or charity, but from the simplest act of care. For a long moment, they stood there, wrapped in quiet certainty. Their story had begun with a fall, but it had risen into something enduring. A love built not on fortune, but on faith. A reminder that sometimes the smallest rescue can rewrite two entire lives. A year later, spring returned once more, softer this time, like a familiar song. The city had changed, but not as much as the people who lived inside it. The Haven Gallery had become a heartbeat for the community, its doors never closed, its walls forever changing with new art and new hope. Every morning, sunlight poured through its windows, landing on canvases painted by children who once believed they had nothing left to give. Flora walked through the gallery's main hall, her fingertips tracing the frames. She paused before the newest edition. A painting of a girl fainting beneath crystal lights, a man catching her before she hit the floor. It was the first time she had ever painted their beginning. At the corner of the frame, a small plaque read, "The Moment Kindness Found Me," by Flora Carter. Samuel entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You still work even on your day off," he said with a smile. She turned, laughing softly. "And you still forget to eat breakfast." "Oh." He handed her a cup and kissed her forehead. "You sound like my wife." "I am your wife," she teased, glancing at the gold ring that still shone as brightly as the day he placed it there. They walked together to the courtyard behind the gallery, where children were painting on long strips of paper spread across the grass. One of them ran up holding a dripping brush. "Mrs. Carter, can you show me how to make the sky look alive?" Flora knelt beside him. "You do not paint the sky," she said. "You feel it first, then your hand will know what to do." The boy nodded seriously, then dashed back to his spot, determined. Samuel watched the scene unfold with quiet pride. "You are changing the world one canvas at a time," he said. She shook her head. "No, Samuel. We are just reminding it to see beauty again." The breeze carried laughter and the scent of wet paint. From inside, the soft hum of music floated out, an old melody from the night of the first gala. Flora looked up at the open sky and smiled. "It is strange," she murmured, "that everything began with one fall." Samuel's hand found hers. "Maybe it was not a fall," he said gently. "Maybe it was how the universe made sure we would meet." She leaned against him, eyes half closed, listening to the rhythm of the world they had built together, simple, imperfect, and real. Beyond the courtyard, the gallery lights began to glow as evening settled in, the word Haven shining softly against the sky. And so, the girl who once fainted at a gala now stood surrounded by color, laughter, and love. Not as a symbol of rescue, but as proof that one act of kindness can ripple through time, turning strangers into partners, pain into purpose, and a single moment into forever.